Wednesday, September 20th, 2023 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting is being held electronically, but we intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comment will be via telephone or Zoom only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or join via the Zoom link. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16. So Chris,
recording in progress.
Okay. So Chris, if you could please call roll.
Okay, I will now call roll. I've received regrets from Commissioner Hutchinson and Margolis, who will not be able to attend. Please say here and from where you're dialing when your name is called. Commissioner Bolden.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Ackman.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Brogan.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Altomaki.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hook.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Keeler.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Okay. Commissioner Clayman.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Okay. Commissioner Hess.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Lieutenant Mike Sherbo.
Here from Tyrone Township.
Okay. We have quorum.
Thank you. There are two items on the consent agenda: approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes. Are there any modifications to the consent agenda? Molly? Oh, sorry. I thought you had just.
No, sorry, that was my cat.
All right. Okay. With that, if there's a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, motion by Wanwu, seconded by Megan. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no or raise your hand. The consent agenda is approved. Public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Again, if you'd like to speak, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID 934-6385-2907 or connect via Zoom as described on the agenda. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or the person's Zoom ID. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone or select the raise hand button in Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we can hear you clearly. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments. Let's see.
All right, the first speaker is Clark Chernetsky. Clark, I've gone ahead and unmuted you. The floor is yours. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I know one of the things we'll be taking up this evening has to do with crossing US 23 in a non-motorized fashion. When I was younger in bike lot, I used to have to do that. And I tried several crossings, and it's not a very pleasant thing to do. In fact, it's dangerous at times. So I fully support your work that you'll be undertaking to get MDOT to improve the crossing of US 23. That expressway also often serves as a barrier between the different parts of the county, and it's best to try to link that as much as possible. Also, I'd like to welcome Larry Keeler to your committee. I've had the pleasure of working with him on the executive committee of the local advisory council for the ride, and it's a pleasure working with him, and he'll be a productive member of your committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any public commenters.
Okay, somebody just called in. Okay, there's a hand raised for, yeah.
Caller with the last three digits 955. I've gone ahead and allowed you to speak. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Hi, good evening. This is Kirk Westfall, 3505 Charter Place. I just wanted to comment on a couple items on the agenda. One was the US 23 resolution and also the road diet discussion. With regard to the US 23 resolution, I definitely support the call for reevaluating resources to improve non-motorized connections. But I'd ask you to consider adding a phrase or a resolve clause that explicitly recommends against adding lanes to US 23 in any form. MDOT's presentation to stakeholders earlier in the year, which they don't link to on their project information page, makes it pretty clear that they expect to add lanes, either so-called flex lanes or HOV or general purpose lanes. I think many of us recognize that there's deep fiscal and cultural failures in MDOT, and their oversight board and director are the responsibility of the governor. And this is leading them to continue the just insanity of creating new car capacity. We can hope for better leadership, in the future, but in the meantime, I think it's up to municipalities to protect ourselves and exert whatever pressure we can on MDOT. Not only are we the state with the highest number of lane miles per person, and have zero plans for maintaining lanes, adding highway capacity is definitely going to work against our emissions reductions goals and bring more drivers and more pollution into our borders. And I don't know if you've had conversations with the county board of commissioners, but I'd hope that they would be inclined to express their objection to MDOT working against their own VMT reduction goals. The other item is road diets. My own belief is that if we're truly a Vision Zero community, road diets shouldn't just be considered as a tool that's in the menu of options. I believe that they should be deployed immediately with paint at first, if just necessary.
$30 seconds.
I think there was an issue.
It's hi. I think I was muted. Am I back on, or is my time
Yes,
up?
yes, you are. Okay, we'll start from the 30 seconds.
30 seconds left. Okay. So I think that road diet should be deployed immediately, so that there's no multi-lane roads left in Ann Arbor. I don't know what's going to be presented to you tonight, but if it's the city's belief that we should preserve any of our existing multi-lane roads, I hope we can be provided with examples of such roads in cities across the country that have seen no serious injuries. Otherwise, I think preserving multi-lane roads is just simply a inherent violation of our promise to eliminate road injuries. Thanks for taking my call and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no one, thank you to all of the members of the public for your valuable comments this evening. I'd like to also direct commissioners to the emails we received that are part of our packet. 3 or 4 emails. Look at those. All right, first item of business, bike pedestrian crossings in US 23. So MDOT has started an environmental assessment study for US 23 between M14 and I-94. City staff's providing input on this initiative and would like us to consider a resolution, which you've seen or received, advocating for better bike and pedestrian accommodations across US 23. So Raymond, if you could provide some additional background, and we can review the draft resolution that's included in the packet, please.
Yes, happy to do that. I will go ahead and share my screen and pull the resolution on the screen. Hopefully that is showing for everybody. All right. So yes, MDOT is studying US 23 trunk line operations. And as one of our public speakers mentioned, it's probably not a surprise that MDOT might be considering some capacity issues. They are kind of in the very beginning throes of this initiative. And one of the things, if you're familiar with the environmental assessment process, one of the important first steps is to develop purpose and need, which really establishes the framework by which the project is going to be evaluated by, right? It's kind of the sort of guiding principles of the study. And so MDOT is currently working on the purpose and need. And so in some of the discussions that our team has been involved in, there does not seem to be as much attention being paid to bicycle pedestrian accommodations. Now, that may make sense on US 23 proper, why bikes and peds are not accommodated along the freeway. But as I think you all know, MDOT owns and operates and controls any of the structures that go over, under, or are in interchange with a freeway. So even if the city owns, for example, both sides of the road on either side of the bridge itself is owned by MDOT. And so those bridges tend to present a bit of a choking point and a barrier, especially for non-motorized travel. And so when we kind of saw the direction the study was headed, we thought there should probably be a greater emphasis on that. And so we drafted the resolution that's included in your packet for consideration. If this is something that the Transportation Commission will support, then we will signify that to City Council, and if City Council decides to take up a resolution as well, then it would be kind of entered into the record with MDOT. Now, that's no guarantee that purpose and need will change or things like that, but it's at least stating the city's position. So, there are several whereas clauses, the preambulatory clauses, kind of giving some history on the US 23, identifying that there are 8 crossings along US 23 within Ann Arbor, that, you've had a lot of development over the years that's led to a mix of different uses, and that these uses have generated demand across US 23 for, all walks of life and all modes of transportation. But along those lines, the walking and bicycling environment tends to be incomplete or hostile. And then when we talk about, the carbon neutrality plan and mode shift to walking, biking, and transit use, as well as our Vision Zero plans to improving safety and comfort for people walking and biking, as well as creating an all ages and abilities bicycle network. Then there's another clause talking about, walking and biking promotes healthy, equitable, socially connected, and economically vital communities. And then, identifying that MDOT is in the process of the environmental assessment study, that there is a project identified for upwards of $250 million to make improvements along US 23. But MDOT has kind of indicated on the onset that bridges and overpasses that are not required to be replaced will be preserved as is and will be excluded from the project's scope and budget. So the resolve clauses read as follows. Resolve, the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council pass a resolution that requests the Michigan Department of Transportation include safe, comfortable walking and biking facilities on all 8 US 23 crossings as a specific purpose and need in the environmental assessment. Resolve, the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council pass a resolution that requests the Michigan Department of Transportation reevaluate the resources needed to rebuild the US 23 freeway while completing the walking and biking connections across US 23. And then finally, resolve, the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council direct staff to coordinate with Ann Arbor Township, Pittsfield Township, Washtenaw County Road Commission, Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Michigan Department of Transportation to build continuous, comfortable, safe places for people to walk and bike across the entire US 23 environmental assessment study area. And so, Brett, with that, that's the highlights that I wanted to share with you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or turn it back over to you all for discussion.
Yeah, what questions or comments do people have on this proposed resolution? Raise your hands or just, yeah, Ken?
So, Raymond, can you refresh me on with the 8 different area or the 8 different crossings that we're going to have? Is there going to be, how is this going to necessarily direct council? Just a blanket approach saying that we want to prioritize biking more than we have for all of these crossings, or are we going to say, like for Washtenaw Avenue, where they've told us that there's going to be a limited amount of right of way, even though my agency has been asking, for an expanded footprint for extra lanes. I guess I'm kind of curious about how this is going to affect the balance of what we're advocating for on some of these crossings of active transportation versus transit. And then on most of these crossings, I understand that, active transportation, definitely I would support those. But like in the Washtenaw corridor, I guess I'm having mixed feelings on that right now, just due to the fact that we all know that active transportation does serve a very important need. But if we're talking about commuters coming into the city, how many ever tens of thousands of cars that we have, active transportation is not going to serve as the primary mode to be able to accommodate most of those. So could there be any sort of acknowledgement that at least in the Washtenaw corridor that there could be preference given to transit, and then active transportation also plays a role in there? Or does this have to be a generalized statement about, basically applying the same standards to all the crossings?
Yeah, I'll attempt a response, Ken. I don't think there's a right answer or wrong answer. I think when we drafted this, what we had in mind was really just trying to put on the radar for NDOT a sort of consideration or accommodation for bike paths across all of the underpasses, overpasses, and interchanges. I'm of the opinion, and granted, I know this is resources and there are different things at play here, but I'm of the opinion that those need not be either or when it comes to transit, especially when we talk about the Washtenaw corridor. I understand and appreciate and respect, the ride's position about, for example, I know the ride's long range plan talks about Washtenaw as maybe a bus rapid transit corridor. That I've seen in some communities where you can have adequate accommodations for transit as well as bike paths through interchanges. What we tried not to do is specify, the level of design or detail that is appropriate, or, what the accommodation should be. That process should play out through the EA process, but really just trying to underscore, the need to create those linkages on either side of or through the freeway interchanges or underpasses and overpasses. And I don't know if others want to speak to that as well, but that's kind of where our headspace was at when we drafted this. Let me stop sharing screen. It might be easier for folks I can pull it back up if you'd like, but for now, for conversation, it's probably easier to see each other's faces.
There we go.
All right. Dharma?
Yeah, the way I read the resolution, I don't see these things at odds at all. I mean, as a sidebar, I wish we would consider dedicating one of those lanes to bus rapid transit, one of the existing lanes. But I think this is really about, and I actually took this route recently. If you go down Washtenaw towards like where the sheriff's office is, you have to cut across a area where people are, it's an on-ramp to a freeway. So I think what you're talking about, Raymond, just if you could confirm, is about having a better way than like a desire line that's just going through some grass and onto a sketchy sidewalk with a bunch of high-speed traffic. So I don't see how this really takes away from transit at all.
Right. Yeah, I think that's consistent with, again, where we were thinking that, the one interchange that has some accommodation is Washtenaw, but admittedly, it's probably subpar, to put it mildly. And Dharma, if you recently biked through it, you can attest better than anyone. So yeah, I think the idea is to really, if we're trying to be multimodal, again, transit accommodations as well as bike ped accommodations.
All right, Ken, you still have your hand up? You have another comment?
Oh, no, sorry about that. Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Other comments? I was kind of wondering, Raymond, if there's anything specific or more specifics that are intended by the second resolve clause, which requests that MDOT reevaluate the resources needed to rebuild. What are you getting at with that?
Yeah, a common message, I wanted to use a different word, but a common message we hear from MDOT is that they don't program some of these improvements as part of the project and will use kind of the budget as sort of a rationale. Many of you may recall from a couple of years ago, North Main Street, which has been kind of tabled for we don't know how long, but MDOT said they are only resurfacing from curb to curb, and if the city wants any bike ped accommodations or any other improvements, it would be on the city's dime. We've heard a similar sort of beginning discussion in that same vein to say, we're not opposed to it, but if you want it, you're going to have to pay for it. And if you think about what it would take for the city to try to muster the resources to do a bridge project or something like that, that's not even ours, under our control, that is maybe not a reasonable request. We ran into the same thing on the Liberty Bridge that was hit. We sent a letter asking MDOT for bicycle pedestrian accommodations. They said there's no budget for it. They even did the same thing to us on Jackson crosswalks, right? They said, we're not opposed to it, but we're not going to pay for it. So there's been a sort of history of this positioning to say we're only focusing and allocating resources for the automobile movements, and anything beyond that. So this is just a long-winded way of saying that more than just giving it lip service, it should actually be part of the project, and therefore resources dedicated to the project should reflect that as well.
Okay, I really appreciate the explanation. And since this is something that we would be recommending to City Council, I would recommend that when City Council takes this up, that maybe they're a little bit more explicit and give more concrete direction about what we really want with that statement. So, but I agree. Thank you for the explanation, Peter.
I think it's worth noting that more car traffic volume through these interchanges will make it even more difficult and more expensive for us to fund safe ways to get through. And I think it's worth.
Hey Peter, it looks like your video and audio are yeah. I don't know if there's a way to get a better signal. Maybe try again. Go back a few seconds. Or just audio only. Let's give this a try.
Yeah, audio only help.
It's not great. Maybe try reconnecting or something.
Well, maybe I'll try reconnecting. All right, I'll be back in a minute.
Okay. As you would expect, the audio is perfect as he exits. Any other comments while we wait for Peter? Okay. Point of clarification, Raymond, just while we wait. If one of the crossings is an underpass, does the city does own the road under, like, for example, Packard, but not the bridge structures, the columns and stuff. Those are defined by MDOT, but the actual surface of the road the city owns. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
But as you can probably surmise too, a lot of times those superstructures and support structures are the things that confine and pinch the ability to make other improvements.
Sure. All right, let's go back to Peter real quick, see how that goes.
Sorry for the technical challenge. Can you hear me, guys? Can you hear me now?
Seems good. Maybe not. No, you're frozen again. Yeah, looks like you're frozen. Let's hop
Okay,
over
good.
to
I was
Dharma.
gonna say,
Let's go with Dharma real quick.
While we wait for Peter to resolve his technical difficulties, I just wanted to express my gratitude for staff taking this opportunity to imbue this project that's not ours with our values. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, now that maybe if you've cut video, maybe it's better.
hopefully, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Dharma, yes, well said. I like what you just said. I'd also like to add that more car traffic volume at these interchanges is going to make it more difficult to have safe non-motorized routes through there. So I think it is worth mentioning that we're not in favor of things like new lanes on US 23 that will increase volume. I thought that was a really good comment that we heard earlier in the meeting. So I think that would be an appropriate thing to add to this resolution.
So it sounds like there is some interest in an amendment to add a resolved clause. Is that a motion, Peter? Would you like to motion that? Or
yeah. Do I need to have some sample language in mind, or do I need to propose some language before I can make a motion?
well, I suppose, but also, is there an implication to council who would be receiving this that is an intent, or we probably need to spell it out if, as we send it to council, right? Rather than just comments in the meeting.
Yeah, I think it should be an amendment to the resolution if that's what the body desires to do. And, Peter, to the extent you feel comfortable crafting some language here on the fly, you're welcome to do that. As long as we can get it, most of the way there, then we can, add some punctuation to it before we finalize the resolution.
Okay. So I guess I would say resolved. Well, it seems like we might need a whereas clause that says that extra volume on US 23 will, make it more difficult to navigate these interchanges with non-motorized transportation. And then a resolved clause that says that that the Transportation Commission is not, or
we could start like the other resolved clauses, which is resolve the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council pass a resolution that discourages MDOT from adding lanes on this section of US 23.
Discourages adding lanes and other actions that will increase traffic volume on this section of US 23.
Okay. So the amendment, if I've got it, would read something like, or would read, resolve The Transportation Commission recommends the City Council pass a resolution that discourages MDOT from adding lanes or to this section of US 23 or any or making any other actions that would encourage increased volume on this section of US 23.
I just typed something up. Can I share it with you, maybe? Or put it on the screen? I don't know what I'm able to do.
If you want to share your screen, that might be easier than just emailing it. But,
I'll try that.
he might not. Okay, there you go.
Brad, I would specify that it should be auto-centric volume. Obviously, we want to increase non-motorized, but just specify auto-centric volume.
Okay, on US 23, I think that's the law anyway, right? I don't think it's legal to ride a bike or anything on there, but or did you mean like transit or something else? Or
transit.
Yeah, or like single occupant.
Oh,
yes, that's single occupancy.
Okay, yeah.
Can you see my okay.
Instead of single occupancy, how about private vehicle traffic?
Yeah, I think that's good, Lily.
Is that the intent of this study? Basically to say we want to reduce US 23's utilization or to have more equitable modes? I just want to, again, point out, hey, listen, we should have clear legibility on where we should have vehicular traffic relative to. We don't want to obviously increase reliance on it, but to the extent that we want to increase legibility on what's designated for connectivity and non-motorized versus motorized. To me, I think the single occupant vehicle miles traveled is the reduction kind of target for A20, or I'm sorry, moving together, or A20 carbon neutrality. So I just, I'm throwing out there, I mean, is it, we want all cars gone from US 23 period? I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the goal, right?
I guess I'm asking that we discourage actions that will increase volume on US 23.
Or okay. And I'm trying to, I guess, point out single occupant vehicle miles traveled, or private vehicles, I suppose.
I guess it's not clear to me the distinction that we're making between single occupancy vehicle and private vehicle. What am I not getting here?
So I'm concerned if we talk about single occupancy and then they say, oh, we'll just make it an HOV lane, and they still widen the road and they are still putting private cars in those lanes, that to me is something we want to discourage. Transit of various flavors, which may or may not always be buses, I think we do want to encourage. It's about moving people, right? Moving people, not cars.
Okay.
That's why I'm making that distinction.
Thank you. That makes sense to me now. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So Peter's the one that's moving this. Peter, are you happy with this wording before you seek a second? Or does anyone else, do you want to, other people can amend your amendment, I suppose, but
yeah, I would like to move that. I'd like to move that we add this amendment, this additional resolved clause as shown on the screen.
Okay, seconded by Julie. Okay, any more discussion on the amendments? Okay. Yep, Julie.
Yeah, I just wondered if is this section clear enough, or should that be disambiguated? Maybe that can be done after the staff.
Yeah, that could be cleared up. When this goes to City Council. None of the other resolved clauses are explicit about which sections of US 20. They just say US 23. So I assume that could be part of that process. Yeah. Dharma.
I was just going to say what's being typed, the project area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this is a specific project. That's
why. So do we, I guess, do we change it now before we vote on it? I'm okay. I'm okay adding that. I think that's a good change to make. Julie.
Yeah, I think it's fine to just, if you're happy to change it.
Yeah. Volume. Area.
And, Raymond, if there needs to be any wordsmithing, feel free. All right, any other comments on the amendment? Then let's vote. All those in favor of the amendment as shown on the screen, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt real quickly. I just want to, are we voting? So the vote is right now on the amendment. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, who was the second on that? I missed.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, sorry, was there a second? I think,
I seconded, but I think then you said Julie. It's
Yeah.
Mal.
Yeah.
Okay. I was typing notes. I was trying to capture what Pete wrote, so that's why I missed it. So who are we attributing to? Boland? Kleinman?
Yeah, Molly seconded it.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry for the trip up there.
That's fine. So again, if we could have yes or hands raised for those in favor of the amendment as shown.
Yes, Peter Houck.
Yes.
All right, those opposed, please raise your hand or say no. All right, the amendment is approved as shown. So Raymond or staff, if you can add this at some point to the.
Do I need to send this, or have you got a screenshot or something? How do you want to do that?
I think I typed it up. Thank you. You
Okay,
kept
great.
it long enough that I was able to grab it. Thank you.
Okay. So back to any other discussion on the original resolution, the original motion. Wanwu?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a amendment right now, but in the whereas I think it's the third one, the land adjacent to US 23 is developed across decades with a dense mix of residential, commercial, professional, recreational purposes. Maybe consider something to the effect that the future zoning designations Plymouth, Washtenaw are intended to be, TC1. So we are going to see additional increased density. I mean, that's at least the thought anyways. We saw a PUD on Green Road, I think last night, that talked about adding additional density. So not a particular change, but something to recognize that even the land use patterns of our zoning is pushing towards additional density, particularly on the Plymouth and Washtenaw corridor. So so I just mentioning that as like a potential. Whereas as you guys work on that, like as you guys clean this up, there is a certain level of land use policies that will increase density. So just making that point. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Dharma?
And Raymond, I'm assuming you probably have more recent information than this, but I'm just looking at the project page from MDOT for this, and it actually says that one of the goals of the project is to operation for users along and crossing the corridor, and it actually talks about key crossings. So I don't know, I just thought, I'm not sure if I'm happy to take that to council as just like a whereas clause, but it seems like even they were admitting that was part of the issues that they were trying to address. Unless you've heard differently since.
Yeah, no, I think it's sometimes, I think you're right. But we're not seeing a lot of evidence that they're considering all modes on those crossings. So that's why we felt like just based on the few meetings we've been to, that there seemed to be a need to underscore the non-motorized element.
Oh no, there definitely is. I just wondered if it was worth saying, whereas, MDOT says that one of the key issues is non-motorized connections across US 23. That's all I meant, I mean, they are saying that.
Use their own words.
Yes.
If you want to amend this to add anywhere else clauses, we can do that, or take that with you as something is drafted to go to city council.
I think that's with the whereas clause. I'm comfortable doing that. Waiting till then.
Waiting until city council. Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, whereas clauses don't really change, you know,
Yeah.
they're not resolved clauses, but all right. Any other discussion on the resolution as amended? All right. Is there a motion to recommend approval of the resolution to restore community connections with continuous, comfortable walking and biking facilities across US 23? Is there a motion to recommend? All right, Julie, seconded by Megan. All those in favor of the amended motion, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
And all those opposed, please say no or raise your hand. Peter, we got your hand raised for the yes, I'm assuming, right? I think that's the case. Okay, so the motion passes as amended. Thank you for that. Okay. All right, next up, Transportation Commission bylaws amendment. Our bylaws call for an annual review to see if changes are desired or needed. This will be an open discussion moderated by Raymond to see if the commission has any changes in mind that we'd like to consider.
All right, so one little sidebar. Thank you to Dharma and the rest of City Council. They did approve the Transportation Commission bylaw amendment from a year ago. Actually, almost to the day. Again, mea culpa. I apologize it took so long to get that in front of council. But the original amendment as proposed by Transportation Commission stood. There were no changes, as I understand it. You know, there's this discussion about whether there should be an age requirement for one of the seats. That is not what was voted upon two nights ago. So as it stands now, there are 7 members of the public, in addition to kind of the representation from some of the other, like Planning Commission, Ann Arbor Transportation Authority, and the Commission on Disability Issues. So anyway, that was just a little sidebar I wanted to let you know about. But for this, what I wanted to just mention, in some of this was in your homework, but if you had a chance to scan the bylaws, you may have come across Article 11.2, which states that these bylaws shall be reviewed by the Commission for possible amendment at least once annually. So what we wanted to do is just bring it in front of the Commission to see if there are any suggested changes. Over the course of the past year, I haven't heard of any from the commission per se. That's not to say that maybe you aren't stewing on something, but you know, I know when the one that came up last year was a conversation that I think we were having with Molly for a while because we were having difficulty filling the seat. I haven't heard any such calls for any other changes, but really what I wanted to do is just hear from you all to see if you feel there are any changes. I have the bylaws ready. I can show them. We can walk through them real quickly if that's a good use of time, but if you feel like leaving good enough alone, or if you think they're good enough and can be left alone for now, that's fine. So it's really just at your discretion in terms of how you want to have the conversation if you think there are any changes that are needed.
Any comments or questions on our annual review of our bylaws? Okay. Oh, Dharma, yes.
Waiting to see if anyone else would. I mean, we did have a discussion last time when we considered the seat for 55 and up on whether we should more explicitly address a commitment to diversifying our seats. And, you know, I think diversity can be accomplished a number of ways. I'm not suggesting that we reserve seats for particular people necessarily, but I think I shared the ICPOC bylaws where they mention wanting to have diversity across a range of people who are affected by the criminal legal system. It just made me wonder if we should consider that, because I think we have this equity report from the Equitable Engagement Committee that talks about the overrepresentation in our local government by predominantly older white homeowners. And I think it's always worth seeking more diverse viewpoints on all of our commissions. So
Yes, Molly.
So this is a conversation that I feel like I was involved in going back to when Linda Diane was still chair of the commission. And I believe very strongly that we need a concerted effort to improve representation across all the boards and commissions in the city. But I have been increasingly convinced that that action has to come from city council and that it can't really be effective coming from one commission at a time. The mayor nominates commissioners and the council approves them. And I think that there are probably things that the city could be doing to set a commitment to increase diversity and improve representation across all of the commissions. My impression was that we were sort of waiting because there was going to be like a DEI officer hired in the city, and that this would be the kind of thing that would make sense for that person to initiate. And so I would be comfortable, having a resolution that's like, city council, please help us do this. But I'm increasingly convinced that it's not going to be as effective if we try to do it ourselves as a commission.
Thank you. Julie?
I just second everything that Molly said. I think like the application doesn't give us the right information, and it's the same application, I think, for all the commissions. So I think something has to be done at a more institutional level. And I do think it's super important. So go city council.
Yeah, I third that. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Oh, yep, Dharma.
I just want to say I appreciate the feedback, and I'll take it back. Thank you.
All right. Yep, we have that message sent to Dharma. Is there any other desire to speak on our bylaws for our annual review before we move on? If not, thank you. Obviously, if you have any ideas or suggestions for bylaws changes at any point, talk to Raymond or Megan or myself. We can always initiate a change. This is just a mandated annual review, so that is always open for discussion.
And Brett, just to clarify, since I'm not hearing any thing, then we don't need to bring this issue back at this time unless, a commission member has something specific to discuss, correct? Okay, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, okay, so do we need to have a motion then indicating that no changes are suggested, or we can move on? Okay.
If there's consensus on what I just stated, I don't think that we need a motion to not do anything.
Okay. All right. Next order of business, Grandview traffic calming. Grandview from Jackson to Dexter. The petition process for the Grandview traffic calming is now complete and before us for our recommendation. So Raymond, if you could review the project and answer any questions.
Yes, thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. All right, so we received a petition for traffic calming on Grandview between Jackson and Dexter, and as is par for the course, after a series of meetings with the neighborhood, the final concept proposes 2 speed humps. This concept was supported by 91% of the respondents to the final poll, which brings it before you today. And then we're seeking your recommendation before taking it to City Council for their approval. We estimate the cost to be around $35,000, which is consistent with another project we did of similar magnitude. And the one thing I did want to clarify in terms of process, and Dharma and I were exchanging some emails on Monday about, the traffic calming resolution passed, earlier this month, as I'm sure many of you are aware, and I was going to report on later. But the way we're handling these petitions that are pretty far along in the process are already in queue. We're following the existing program process, just for expectation and kind of clarity in terms of what those petitioners can expect. But any new petitions that come into the process will kind of follow the newer process as outlined by City Council. So I just wanted, first of all, I will also mention that's one of the reasons why you don't have the draft resolution in here, because we weren't quite sure. I was waiting for some clarification from legal, and then when Dharma and I were able to kind of synchronize on that note, that helped clarify that we will go ahead and advance this to council if this receives, well, we'll advance it to council regardless, but it will reflect your recommendation as well. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Raymond. Any questions about this Grandview project? Okay. Okay, can I have a motion then to recommend approval of the Baldwin traffic calming project between Packard and Stadium? I moved by Dharma, seconded by Wanwu. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
All those opposed to the motion, please
Yeah.
say no or raise your hand. The motion passes. All right, next up, the information and discussion section. First topic is the speed management program update. Staff continues to advance the development and eventual implementation of the speed management program. So we have Suzanne Flowers here this evening to provide an update on this initiative. So Suzanne.
Thank you. And just for those of you who I have not met, thank you so much for having me this evening. And again, Suzanne Flowers, a transportation planner on Raymond's team, and just really excited to be at I think one of my first Transportation Commission meetings.
Thank you for coming.
And Raymond, can I get a thumbs up to make sure you can see my screen?
Coming through. Yep.
Excellent. So as already noted, I'm going to provide a quick brief update on the speed management program. And the four main areas I'll be focusing on this evening are background, program launch, our focus groups, and kind of what our next steps are planning to be. Just as a reminder, the speed management program was developed as part of the implementation contract with Sam Schwartz. The plan was adopted in 2021, and one of the key behavioral problems that have been really brought forward is speed. And so the two graphics that I have on your screen this evening are found within our plan, but it really talks to this issue that we have with speed and how dangerous it can be for our most vulnerable road users, those being pedestrians and cyclists. So we can see the graphic on the left is a pretty well-known graphic that highlights at 20 miles an hour, 9.5 out of 10 people who are walking or biking survive a crash. At 30 miles per hour, we see that cut in half to 50% surviving. And then when we have speeds at 40 miles per hour and above, it is 1 out of 10 people surviving a serious crash. That is very troublesome for our community. And knowing that we have become a Vision Zero community, we really want to address this. Additionally, the speed management program highlights the graphic on your right that our major streets comprise 25% of our total streets, but they see 89% of our severe and fatal traffic crashes. And that's very concerning. So the speed management tool was done, as I mentioned, in consultation with our Sam Schwartz implementation contract. And the tool focuses on highlighting all of the eligible roadways. So I will be popping this out in just a minute, but to kind of go through the tabs, we provide an overview of why we have the speed management program, what are the specific tools that are eligible in this program, where the streets are eligible for that, input that we have asked people to provide us in the past, and our frequently asked questions. And the map, I just want to take a moment to review that we do have a high, medium, and low categorization for all of our major streets. And this was really based on a needs score on the severity of crashes and whether they were identified as a tier 1 or tier 2 roadway. And then they took the summation of all of those and really split them into thirds, high, medium, and low, based on that severity. And I am going to just walk through the tool rather quickly. But again, the great thing with this tool is anyone can go up to the tabs at the top and skip to a particular section that they want, or someone can scroll through the same information. So again, it provides a background on why major streets are important, why we're focusing this program on that, how we came up with the different tools that are presented in the toolbox. And the 4 main tools that we have are this horizontal deflection, things you drive around, things you drive on, signs and street markings. And I'm not going to go through all of the tools because I'm sure all of you have done your homework prior to this evening's meeting. But the one neat thing that was built, because there are like 22 different treatment options that can be provided. If you want to jump to different treatments, you can scroll over on the very left side and it will pop out, for example, like lane reduction. So you can click on lane reductions, get all of the information, a brief description, the type of cross-section. This could be an example road where this may have already been applied, a peer city, and more information. I think the biggest piece that I'd like to focus on for another moment or two, and this may take a minute to load, is really that distribution of where we want to see these facilities change in Ann Arbor. And if you scroll into the map, you're able to click on any of these streets that are part of the program, which I'm doing right now. For example, I'm clicking on Fuller Road, and it provides for, let me scroll just a little, the particular segment, the beginning and end points, the jurisdiction, the prioritization, speed limit, the posted speed limit, number of lanes, and ADT. It also provides for the potential speed management tools. In the provide your input section, this is the area that we have been using to put information out to the public, request public information, and then all of the feedback that we received were developed into our frequently asked questions. And so I'm going to go back to my slide deck. And so when we initially launched the program, what we did is we had the story map, which you just saw, and then we also provided an opportunity for people to provide a very high level comment on the program. We asked 2 simple questions. What questions do you have about the program? And would you like to share comments? And like I said, those were used to develop the entirety of our frequently asked questions. And there are a multitude of those questions within the tool. Following that conversation, we really thought a little bit more about getting the public more engaged within the program development. And so we decided to have a series of focus group discussions, which was held by Smith Group. So staff were not directly involved with it because we really wanted to have an unbiased opinion in the kind of group interviews. And so we mailed out 1,000 postcards to randomly selected addresses across the city. And we really were clear on kind of the focus group purpose. So the purposes were really on getting feedback on the tools and the specific information, how the program will work or how we envision the program to work at this time. We wanted people to test the endorsement tool and then look at generally how they can stay engaged with the program. So following those focus groups, we did, like I said, 1,000 postcard mailings, and then we also reached out to about 15 targeted stakeholders. Many of you may have been reached out to by me to participate in those group interviews. And so I will just take a moment to review some of the highlights from what we heard. One of those items being, we really want to be more deliberate, or the public would really like us to be more deliberate on what we mean by speed limits and speed reduction. And so they really looked for us to decide, is it the posted speed, or do we really want the traveling speeds overall for people to just go slower? So we really want to be more clear on our story map and in information that we present to the public. They also really wanted to see on projects that had been recently completed that were tied into, the high, medium, and low speed management program area. The endorsement tool, they wanted to have more questions on people's current list of concerns that they have along corridors, and to provide more opportunity for them to say, today's conditions are X, and we'd like it to be, more walkable, more transit friendly. There was a little bit more feedback on the endorsement map. They wanted to have a little bit more technical information related to how these tools were being used. Clear statement about how input and endorsements are also to be used. Add a tracker showing what has been done on the priority streets. Identifying the purpose of the program more clearly, and to find additional educational opportunities to inform people, especially drivers. One moment. Well, taking all of that feedback, we've really put some additional thought into how we want to roll out like the first official phase of this program. And so we're calling this our Speed Management 1.0. And I think the one thing to note is that we are really looking to utilize the Safe Streets for All grant funding that we were recently awarded to get this program up and running. We're going to focus those locations on our high, medium, and low corridors, as many as we can, but we also want to look at geographic distribution. We don't want to have everything on the west side, north side, or south side. We really want to see a much more blend across the city. We're going to look at they will be temporary devices so that we can actually collect data before and after to really see the effectiveness. We will be looking at using speed data and crash data to evaluate the effectiveness of those treatments. And I had noted in the story map tool, we do have a draft program process that will be pulled down during this first phase. Excuse me, because there will be engagement opportunities. We want to learn the best way to have the dialogue back and forth across the community that can help better inform that process document. And the one educational component that we'll have to make sure we do a very thorough job on is only no local streets are eligible for this program, and only those streets under the jurisdiction of the city of Ann Arbor because of the grant that was provided. Our engagement model will be the inform consult model. And that's it. So I would love to take some questions. And if I can't answer them, I know Raymond will back me up.
And Suzanne, if I could maybe just add a couple points. Thank you for that. one of the reasons you may have heard Suzanne mention that we are thinking about using kind of temporary devices or things like that. Part of the reason for that is based on our conversations with Federal Highway Administration. Because of the grant that we received, which was a planning grant, we have to kind of evaluate the effectiveness of those deployments before they can be put in permanence. And so that is one of the reasons why we're taking that approach. But it also allows some flexibility for us. It really allows us to learn and make adjustments. That's a valuable lesson we're learning as part of Quick Build Part 1, where we've had to make adjustments even with the little delineators. So we think that that approach makes sense even in this application. And there are products on the market where you can get like recycled rubber speed humps, for example. IPSI actually deploys some. Just using that as kind of an example as to why we do that. And then maybe, Suzanne, the other thing I thought we might just want to unpack for just a quick second is the engagement is inform and consult. So the idea, I think many of you are familiar with that, but some of the spectrum of public engagement kind of starts on one end of inform and on the other end goes to empower. The idea is that these are really data-driven decisions. They are reflective of the plan. So speed management is not really up for discussion. We are doing something. So we're going to take engagement on, what we're proposing. We'll make some modifications based on that, but really it's not, we're approaching this as if something needs to happen on these corridors. And we want to hear from folks about what that something is. But not that nothing is not an option if there's a speeding problem. So I wanted to make that distinction because I think that will be something that some will want to discuss in more detail, but that's where our headspace is at right now. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to the commission.
Good discussion, questions, comments, Molly.
This looks great. Thanks so much, Suzanne, for bringing this presentation. I'm really excited to see that it's an informed model, informed consult. I think that's really great. So I'm curious, I guess, about a couple of things. One, I'm curious about the kinds of, I'm sorry, you may have said this, had some distractions. The kinds of data collection and tracking that are going to happen. So I know in other projects where there has been public backlash, things that are really visible, like on Main Street, it's been really valuable to say, like, you're actually only being slowed down 30 seconds, like at peak times, or, whatever kinds of data is there to sort of counter the feelings that people bring to these kinds of things. And so I'm curious about what that data collection is going to look like and what the plans are for that.
Right now, and again, non-engineer, I think one of the best pieces of information that we can have is collecting the speed data before utilizing our current camera technology to see what that delay is at the signals. And that's obviously intersection based. And then we can also look at the crashes, which we are obviously informed of those crashes. And then we receive the finalized crash data. So I feel like those three components staff have access to and are, equipped to be able to analyze fairly quickly and are used to collecting that information. And it will have to be a kind of before condition, during, we need to let things normalize, and then after. And that is one of the items that we also call out in the grant application. So that would be part of our reporting process within Federal Highway as well.
Cool. That sounds great. I know another thing that is probably not feasible for all of these treatments, but the Carytown project, where we had the before and after for cars stopping for pedestrians, was so dramatic and I think really compelling for a lot of people. And so I'm just thinking about if there are points, even if it's not like I'm not asking for this for everything because I don't want data collection to slow anything down, but a point like particularly high pedestrian traffic or bike traffic, if there are points where we can get some of that data as well. I know there's like more bike counters going out, but I think that could also be really valuable to demonstrate that it's helping us achieve.
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the pieces that will be collected, is that kind of use information, because we have a lot of, I think, I don't want to say naysayers, but individuals that are like, but I never see a bike. And it's like the minute you see one bike, you actually see all of them across the city. It's kind of funny, but that would have to be part of the data collection component as well. And so with a lot of the MyoVision cameras and technology today, it's you put that out and you can capture a lot of information, not just the peds and bikes, but we can capture the buses, we can capture, all of the single occupancy vehicles as well.
Thanks.
Peter?
Thanks. What is the timeline for implementing these? Did I miss that?
No, I have good news on that. I don't even think, no, I did forward this to Raymond today. So we've been finalizing for the last couple months our grant agreement. I just sent our final version to our Michigan division at Federal Highway. They are taking that up, all of the 4 or 5 other individuals that have to sign off on it. So I'm waiting for those pieces to be finalized, and then we will be routing and we will be working through our kind of RFP development process to get someone on board immediately. And just generally, the Safe Streets for All grant allows us for 4 years to complete the grant. So thank you to Raymond for kind of pushing a little bit more timing for us to get for our supplemental planning grant.
As a quick follow-up on that, this program isn't dependent on that grant long term, is it?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of that, sir.
Oh, sorry, yeah, to follow up on that question. The funding for this program is not wholly dependent on that one grant long term, I would hope, right?
And I will punt that to Raymond.
Yeah, no, we just see it. So we wrote into the grant, you may recall, first of all, we wrote a lot into that grant proposal, and there were pieces that were cherry picked by US DOT and Federal Highway Administration to fund. The 2 pieces that are particular to this is we have a quick build element that they funded, as well as speed management. And so since those 2 items are specifically called out in the grant, we feel like it's a good use of this funding to put it into action right away. But then we do have other sources of funding that we can use in the future. There's climate millage, there's we have the alt fund, which, is increasingly going towards maintenance, and then we can always pursue other grants as well. So yeah, the idea is to really jumpstart this program is to use the SS4A, the Safe Streets for All funding, because we have that almost in pocket now. And again, tip of the hat to Suzanne. She has been relentless in trying to get Federal Highway across the finish line with us on this grant agreement. You may recall we were awarded this grant back in January. I think we went to council in July, I want to say, or August. No, it was July, I think. And so it still has taken us 3 additional months to hammer out all the language. So we're very close to actually having that in hand. And as Suzanne kind of indicated, our first step is to develop a consultant RFP for design, data collection, all of those pieces that are going to make this program successful. We want to get them on board as soon as possible. Hit that RFP, get that out on the streets, hopefully soon. Then bring a contract to council and get working on that over the winter.
All right, thank you.
And then, sorry, one other follow-up. I think Pete had asked about when implementation might occur. The hope is, if all goes well and things move according to pace, that sometime next calendar year, that you'd start seeing devices being deployed, especially if we can move towards some of these out-of-the-box solutions with rubberized recycled rubber, where we don't have to wait for construction contracts and things like that. We can buy a thing and just plop it down in the road. So
excellent, thank you. Dharma?
Sorry, I had trouble finding my mouse. Thanks so much for this presentation. I was surprised because I thought that we were going to be focusing just on the tier 1, those being the most crash prone, I think. And I think what I heard you say in the presentation is that we're actually going to be doing a spectrum even in this phase 1 of level tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Did I understand that correctly, or?
Yeah, so all of these corridors were identified as either tier 1, tier 2, crash severity, and oh, there was one other piece. Sorry. I specifically asked that question. Based on the numbers and severity of crashes and whether they were identified as tier 1 or tier 2. And then those were simply defined by dividing the overall list into 3 equal parts. So if we wanted to hit all of our tier 1 corridors, we would want to look at the high, the items noted in red. And those are some of our obviously most challenging corridors. They are multi-lane. They also have very high service transit on them. So we want to be, pretty mindful of that, balancing all of the selection.
So sorry, just to clarify, these are level 1 and just geographically dispersed or not?
Yeah, I mean, and Raymond, please feel free to jump in. I mean, if we wanted to focus specifically on just those high noted corridors, we could do that. And based on the available funding, we're not going to get to all the high, medium, and low. Like, there are going to have to be decisions made. And if it's no, let's just focus on the ones that hit our tier 1 corridors and that are high, we can also do that. But we just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that, like, no MDOT roadways were eligible and no local streets.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and if I could just maybe state it a little differently from how my brain works is, we're approaching it with both tier 1 and tier 2 corridors on the table. We are looking for some sort of short-term success. And so, we may look at some multi-lane arterials, but we may also look at some of the single lane in each direction arterials. Obviously, the treatments might be different across those different road types and kind of the character and the context of the area. So while we're not going to shy away from doing something difficult or controversial, we also know we want to kind of build up some momentum behind the program and kind of demonstrate some early success as well. So we have some internal thoughts about which corridors we're looking at, but we want to look at the data. We want the consultant to help us evaluate that. We want to also, vet some of those ideas publicly as well. So there are no firm decisions made in terms of which corridor. We just, as Suzanne said, we want to make sure that there's kind of some geographic distribution. We want to make sure that we're focusing on the tier 1 and tier 2 corridors, and that the treatments that are being proposed will achieve the effect that we're going for, which is reduction of speed.
Got it. And in terms of timeline, when we could expect to know what the first treatment areas will be, when do we think that might be by the end of the year if everything goes smoothly?
I need to pull up my timeline. So
okay.
I think,
know,
I'm really looking at kind of we're getting ready to enter federal fiscal year 2024 because this grant is focused around federal fiscal years October 1. And so with looking at doing not having a grant agreement, so we cannot start any work on anything yet, being able to get an RFP together, put that out to bid, go through conceptual design, NEPA review, and public, I'm thinking federal fiscal year 2025. If we can move quicker on that, great, but that's kind of the project timeline that I have put forward with Federal Highway. So it'd be probably another year. If we can do it faster, then we're going to do it faster, but there are processes involved that are well beyond my control.
I guess now I'm really confused. I'm sorry. Because I thought Raymond just said we might see stuff up in the winter. We might start seeing work in the winter.
Oh, not this winter. No, we have to design. Yeah, we have to design. And, one of the complications with using federal funds is you just heard us talk about NEPA and the environmental assessment for US 23. We are going to have to do NEPA. Now we won't hopefully have to do environmental assessment. Hopefully we can go for I know we won't have to do environmental assessment. The hope is we can do categorical exclusion, which pretty much means this project is, not impactful enough to have to do a whole bunch of extra data collection and analysis. But there are complications with using the federal funds, and we have to jump through some hoops. That's one of the reasons why we want to have a consultant to help us kind of help steer the ship and make sure we're checking all those boxes and doing all the processes that we need to be doing.
And I'm sorry, I misread my notes. I did write that you said you'd work over the winter on it, and implementation is hoped for in 2024, calendar year 2024.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. just getting all my fiscal and actual calendar years confused.
You should see my spreadsheet. It's got like our years, regular calendar years, federal fiscal. Oh, it's very confusing for me sometimes.
Thank you.
All right, other comments or questions? As as I was watching the revisions to the neighborhood traffic calming program go through city council last month, I think, there's a public hearing and a lot of people called in support, and a few people commented that the neighborhood traffic calming program as revised looks great, but they really wish that we could apply something similar to major roads and arterials. And I kept thinking, well, very, very soon they'll get to see this. I've been excited about this for a long time. I'm really glad to get this rolled out for people to see it and to know all the work that our city staff is putting into helping achieve our Vision Zero goals across the city, not just in neighborhoods, but on major roads where it's really needed. So thank you very much. I know a lot of work has gone into defining this program and creating the toolkits, and yeah, this is a big step forward, I think. So thank you, Raymond, Suzanne, and all of your teams for putting this together. Let's see. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next topic, which is somewhat related to this, or I think very related to this: road reconfigurations and road diets. Several commission members, as well as members of the public, have asked for a discussion about road diets. So Raymond is here to give us an overview of the city's approach. This background can inform us in the future if we wish to bring any action to a future meeting on this topic. So Raymond, if you'd like, please go ahead and take us through what you wanted to show us.
I'm working with 3 screens, and sometimes with the new smart PowerPoint, it uses all 3 screens. So I'm going to try to share the right screen. Let me know if it's the wrong screen, please. Let's see.
That looks right.
This page is missing. Ah, there it is. All right, very good. Okay, so yeah, as Brett mentioned, I know there's been a lot of interest and discussion about road diets and road reconfigurations. This is something that we've had a placeholder. I do agenda setting with the chair and vice chair every month, several weeks in advance of the meeting, and we've kind of had this as a placeholder item for several months. We were looking for a good opportunity to kind of bring this forward, and it looked like there was enough time on today's agenda to do that. So thank you for kind of indulging this discussion, and I suspect we'll have future discussions on this subject as well. So what I wanted to do is just start off with kind of a general understanding about what road reconfigurations or road diets are. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read from the Federal Highway Administration's kind of manual on road diets. And they say a road diet or roadway reconfiguration can improve safety, calm traffic, provide better mobility and access for all road users, and enhance overall quality of life. A road diet typically involves converting an existing 4-lane undivided roadway to a 3-lane roadway consisting of 2 left turns and a center 2-way left turn lane. Typically, a road diet is implemented on a roadway with a current and future average daily traffic of 20 or 25,000 or less. And so the graphic that you see before you kind of describes the situation that I just kind of verbally mentioned, which is, 2 lanes each direction, taking away one of those lanes, which then gives you space to put in a center turn lane, a single lane in each direction, and then you also have additional room, possibly for bike lanes or other amenities. Some of the benefits of road diet installations may include a reduction of rear end and left turn crashes due to the dedicated left turn lane. So again, as you can kind of appreciate, if a car is trying to turn left, the car behind it may not expect that vehicle to stop and therefore may rear end that vehicle. So the addition of the center turn lane allows for turning vehicles to kind of get out of the travel lane And even for right turning vehicles allows an opportunity for vehicles to kind of, take their turn, as it were. It also reduces right angle crashes as side street motorists cross 3 versus 4 lanes of travel. So you just have less cognitive burden to be able to, find a gap across 4 lanes. You only have 3 lanes and really 2 travel lanes to kind of thread the needle between. There are fewer lanes for pedestrians to cross. There's also an opportunity to install pedestrian refuge islands in that center turn lane if there are no need to maintain it. Bicycle lanes, as you see on the screen, on-street parking or transit stops. It also has a traffic calming effect and leads to more consistent speeds. And it also has a more community-focused complete streets environment that better accommodates all users. So one of the things I wanted to do is just kind of walk through a couple of the things that we have to do, or things that we have to do and things we do when we evaluate road diets. So the first is there is a standing resolution. It's resolution R-18275, which reads that any proposed lane reduction, city staff shall provide council current traffic volume data, including peak hour volumes and volume to capacity ratios, as well as projections for safety improvements and traffic delays. If you're not familiar with the term volume to capacity, that's V over C, or oftentimes referred to as level of service. So these are some of the requirements that we have to report to council as part of any road reconfiguration or road diet project. Then the other thing, we always turn to our transportation plan. One of the things that I wanted to mention is, for those of you familiar with the previous transportation plan or the non-motorized plan, there was a map that specifically called out road diets. The existing Moving Together Towards Vision Zero plan does not have such a map. It's more a tool in the toolkit for achieving Vision Zero. So you already heard Suzanne talk a little bit about the speed management toolkit, which is an outgrowth of the Vision Zero initiative. And so it really talks about some of the countermeasures that we can use. It identifies street reconfigurations to address dangerous behaviors, particularly speed. And that description reads that street reconfigurations, road diets have demonstrated safety benefits, often reducing travel speeds and making it easier and safer for people walking to cross the street by simplifying the crossing. A road diet reduces the overall number and or size of travel lanes on a street and repurposes that space for other uses such as bicycle infrastructure, dedicated transit facilities, or public space. Some other resources we turn to quite regularly. We follow the National Association of City Transportation Officials, or NACTO. If you're not too familiar with NACTO, I know we've talked about it a little bit in times past, but NACTO was really a response from some of the larger municipalities that were, quite frankly, getting frustrated and impatient with how long it was taking AASHTO. AASHTO is the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. So as you can imagine, there's maybe a disconnect there, similar to how we have a difference of opinions with the state DOT. So NACTO was formed, and it's very data driven, and they believe in a lot of experimentation and really iteration. And then they have a lot of the data to back it up. So they have a lot of great resources that are free, including the urban bikeway design guidelines and urban street design guidelines and others. And so road diets are a pretty heavily identified tool identified therein. Federal Highway Administration also has some really good information and resources related to road diets. So, you already heard me read from some of that. They have some very good checklists. They have some good process for evaluation that we've used in some of our past analyses. The Transportation Research Board, or TRB, is under the National Academies of Science, and they will often produce technical reports, sometimes called NCHRP, the National Cooperative, I never can remember the full title. Let's see, National Cooperative Highway Research Program. So they have best practices to achieving context-sensitive solutions, and they have other resources related to road diets that we can often go to analyze their effectiveness and which data we should be collecting and so forth and so on. Then we also have the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE. They develop a lot of technical manuals about, so for example, the trip generation manual and other highway capacity manual. ITE has their fingerprints on a lot of those documents. And so we will oftentimes look to see some of the research that's coming out of ITE related to road diets and road reconfigurations. And you might be surprised to see MDOT on here. MDOT does have a road diet checklist, and we sometimes use that because, especially if federal funds are being used or any state funds are being used, we like to make sure that we are presenting a case in such a way that MDOT understands that. And so we will use kind of their formulas or their kind of framework of which data should be collected and what those intended benefits are as part of the road diet. So now what I'd like to do, and I will note, this is not an exhaustive list of every road diet that we have done or will do. It's really just meant to kind of give a little bit of context in terms of some of the more recent road diet reconfigurations, ones that I'm kind of familiar with since I've been here at the city over the past 5 years. So when I first came to town in 2018, we had just put in the North Maple road diet. So again, you can see the picture on the left is the before condition, which was 2 lanes of travel in each direction. And then the after condition is the picture on the right, which shows 1 lane in each direction, center turn lane, and a buffered bike lane. So this is a classic example of a road diet, taking a 4-to-3 with a bicycle amenity. One thing to note is you may note that the bicycle lane pictured here is just paint on the road, but Suzanne and Cyrus Nahidi are working on Quick Build 2.0, which will take 11 miles of existing bike lanes, including this one, and start installing vertical delineators, therefore making them protected bike lanes or cycle tracks, if you will. So you will have vertical separation for the Maple Road bike lane from motorists and bicycles. Another recent project is South Main. So again, picture on the left, this is again a classic example. You had Main Street used to have 2 lanes in each direction. We did the road diet 2 years ago, took away one of the lanes, put in a center turn lane. It's almost similar to what you have in on Maple, buffered bike lanes, which again will also be upgraded to protected bike lanes or cycle tracks with the addition of vertical delineators. Hopefully we're finishing design on that. So hopefully we're going to launch that project relatively soon. Little sidebar, I will say there was no messing with there was no photoshopping involved aside from cropping of these photos from Street View. So you'll notice the gray, dreary, pre-road diet pictures on the left in both the case of Maple and Maine, and the bright, sunny blue scenario after. That is not, that's just how Google Street View sees the world. So I just wanted to let you know about that. And some projects that are currently underway. Actually, this project just recently opened up. So Platt, pursuant to direction that we received from council to incorporate an all ages and abilities bike facility on Platt. This is just north of Packard. We went ahead and took away one of the northbound travel lanes and were able to put in a protected bike lane. Has better receiving facilities south of Packard. So this isn't a real traditional road diet. It didn't go necessarily from a 4-lane to a 3-lane, but instead you had kind of this merge scenario. You had some extra lanes, and so we were able to repurpose one of those lanes in kind of unique fashion to be able to put in a dedicated bike facility. Another project that just kicked off construction, I think last month, is Earhart. So again, some of you who've been on the commission may recall back in 2018, I think it was, or maybe even early 2019, there was a proposal to consider a temporary deployment for Earhart. This project was up for, I think, resurfacing and some water main and other improvements. And so now's the opportunity to revisit those issues. We did public engagement on it. And so this project, again, it's not a traditional road diet where there's, the 4-lane to 3-lane because it's a boulevarded section where you have a very wide median on the section of Earhart. But looking at the traffic volumes, looking at the safety improvements and others, we were able to justify removal of one of those lanes in each direction, which will make for a very comfortable, very wide bicycle facility. And if you're looking at this configuration, wondering why the after condition shows kind of a little curvature of the roadway, that's because we're also installing some roundabouts where there were some very wide kind of no person's land of asphalt. Some of that space will be clarified in terms of where people should go. So some of those approaches have been realigned so that people entering the roundabout can approach them at kind of the proper angle. Talking about what's next. So you heard tonight from Suzanne about the speed management program. Lane reductions are specifically called out for in that tool. So there are a lot of tools in that toolkit. There are traffic calming type things that you would typically see on our neighborhood traffic calming program, such as, bump outs, chicanes, vertical devices, raised crosswalks, speed humps, things like that. But you also have lane narrowing, which we have done in recent examples. Now, I didn't go into a lot of detail on those examples, but for example, we recently narrowed the lanes on Packard, East Packard, which allowed us to put in the bike lane, which then led to a decrease in speed, which allowed us to reduce the posted speed limit. So we're using kind of modifications of not maybe full road diets, but actual lane narrowings as well. So this is a tool in the toolkit. I can't promise you whether or not road diets are going to be part of this first round of the speed management deployments that we just talked about, but that's going to be one of the things that's on the table for consideration when we get the consultant on board to help us evaluate what the opportunities are. The other thing I wanted to note is, in terms of the number of corridors that we have that are multi-lane, there aren't a lot under the city's jurisdiction. There's a small handful. So we have Stadium, we have East Packard, we have Eisenhower, we have South Main, Ann Arbor, Saline, not Ann Arbo, but Ann Arbor, Saline. It's pretty embarrassing that I misspelled Arbor as an Ann Arbor employee. Apologies for that. South State Street, Plymouth, Huron Parkway, and Fuller. And so these represent opportunities. Some of them are probably going to be easier than others. And one of the things that I didn't go deep into kind of the technical analyses that's required, but this little graphic on the right is kind of meant to encapsulate. I went through some of the old memos that we've provided to council in terms of the things that we look at and have to look at. So, safety is really the driving factor of what it is we're trying to accomplish. But a lot of other things kind of get folded into the discussion as well. So, there's the engagement and the support that we hear from the community as well as, decision makers and others. There's the data collection that's required, and we want to look at speeds and the crashes. Then you have, other sort of ancillary uses along a corridor. What are the driveways? What are the transit uses? What are the future transit uses? Is bus rapid transit identified? We have land use discussions to think through, especially with the new TC1 zoning district that some of you mentioned this evening. Wong mentioned that earlier. Obviously, non-motorized opportunities. A lot of what's driven our road diets of the past has been the non-motorized plan, or even the all ages and abilities type network and its predecessors to say, oh, we have to put in a bike facility, and the only way for us to put in that bike facility is to put in a road diet. And so that has largely been one of the main drivers for how we've done our work in the past, but we know we need to think a little bit more holistically and broadly in terms of, some of the other benefits as well. Then a couple other things, traffic and kind of, congestion, vehicular delay. That is something we have to report out to council on pursuant to that resolution. So that is something that is still kind of baked into the process. And then parking is another thing, whether there's an opportunity to put in on-street parking or remove on-street parking. One of the road diets that I didn't highlight because it was kind of atypical is we did a road diet on Traverwood. We were able to put in a bike facility by removing one of the travel lanes, but we also were able to put in some on-street parking over there. And that was actually by removal of a center turn lane, because we looked at how many people were using that center turn lane, and it was very few. So that was a kind of atypical application of a road diet, but it just goes to show how you can approach these things through different lenses in terms of what the outcomes are that you want to achieve. And the last thing I wanted to mention in this space, because we do sometimes still get concerns from adjacent neighborhood, is some of the spillover traffic. It is fairly difficult for us to know the full extent of that. There is a way to quantify that. There is a way to study that, but it also, it's sometimes hard to know how far that spillover effect is. So to the extent we can, we try to analyze it. We try to, look at where there's data, and if there isn't the data, maybe look at what some of the usage patterns are and make some, informed decisions about what that spillover effect into adjacent neighborhoods might be. So, it's something that we are mindful of in terms of, solving one problem and hopefully not creating another. So all of that kind of gets baked into the analysis, which then leads us to a decision. And so I think with that pretty much concludes the things I wanted to highlight. Again, I know this is a very cursory overview. This is just kind of an introduction of the concept so that maybe we're sharing a common understanding about what road diets are and what some of those future opportunities are. And I suspect, we'll want to have future discussions on this topic as well.
Thank you. Discussion on this, Molly.
Hi, I still like going first now that I'm not chair anymore. So I really appreciated that you gave us a complete list of all the multi-lane roads in the city. How many of those have volumes over 25,000 a day?
It's funny you asked that, because I was going to put together a table that showed like which roads, like what volumes were. One of the things I will say is a lot of the volume counts that I have are pre-pandemic. So that data probably needs to be refreshed. The other thing to note is some segments of roadway may have vehicular volumes that are relatively high. For example, last time I checked, Plymouth, right near the freeway, had an ADT, average daily traffic volume, of close to 30,000, if I'm not mistaken. But areas to the west of that, for example, when you get past Green, drop off, right? Once you get past Huron Parkway, they probably drop below the 25,000 or maybe even the 20,000 threshold. And we do see that a lot around the interstates, especially the vehicles that are kind of coming off the freeway ramp. They tend to disperse right after that, but right around the interchanges, they tend to have a lot of traffic. So that's just a long-winded way of saying I don't have a great answer in terms of which of these roads are. I know there are some that are that definitely are under that threshold, like Huron Parkway, for example. But then when you look at, for example, Fuller in front of the hospital, it is probably a little bit higher than other places. So long story short, it is something where we probably have to go out and make sure we have more recent counts to really understand kind of the breadth of how many vehicles are using those corridors.
I have another question. Thank you. That was helpful. So it's helpful to know that road diets are considered a part of the speed management toolkit, but I'm wondering if we wanted to sort of push for a more aggressive timeline of road diets. Is that something that would need to come from council? Is that something that staff is empowered to do currently?
Yes and yes, right? I mean, so with the council did repeal resolution. I had it in my talking points. So it was resolution 19-139. That was the resolution that required council approval of all road diets, and that was repealed. So that's to say that we do not need council approval in order for a road diet to advance. However, there are instances like Platte Road where council gave specific direction to staff, and we executed that. So I think it can take either form. One of the things I will say, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, I think some of these corridors will be a little bit easier for consideration than others. And one of the reasons why I bring this up is, we're in ongoing discussions with our friends at the RIDE, AAATA, They do have some plans for higher order transit, whether that's express routes and or bus rapid transit routes. And so when we talk about roads like Plymouth is a good example, I think is one of the corridors. The question is, should we go out and road diet it now if there is a plan for transit to come back and reclaim some of that space for dedicated transit lanes if we ever want to do a true bus rapid transit? And so I just say all that to say, these are some of the sort of considerations, trade-offs, things going through our mind in terms of which corridors we have pursued in the past, which ones we perhaps think maybe we should wait a little bit on. And admittedly, there may have been some, missed opportunities. I know there was some concern and criticism about us not taking advantage of, the resurfacing that occurred on Huron Parkway. That we should have looked more closely at the opportunity for a road diet. I think that's a fair comment. It just was not something we felt like we had enough of the information and data, and it just quite frankly wasn't on our radar. And that's not an adequate excuse, but it just it wasn't something we analyzed. So yeah, it's just there's a spectrum, I think, in terms of feasibility, in terms of ease, maybe is probably the easier word or better word. But again, it is really trying to achieve those outcomes that we highlighted at the beginning of the presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you for asking the exact two questions I wanted to ask Molly. Appreciate it. Dharma?
Thanks for this presentation. I appreciated that you brought up how this intersects with land use planning, because one thing I'm thinking a lot about as we do TC1 is the kind of, if we're putting a bunch of dense housing along Stadium, for example, number one, we probably want to think about how we facilitate bus, throughput in that area. And two, think about how we make it less of a place that you go through on your way to somewhere else and than it is like a place to be. And so I don't know if the opportunity to think about that intersection is how it intersects with the comprehensive land use plan, but that's why diets are on my mind a lot, not only for our Vision Zero purposes, but also just thinking about the kind of place that we're, trying to put a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a great question, especially a corridor like, Stadium. There are opportunities there because of the configuration of that roadway. But in terms of the existing environment, especially for bikes and peds, it's not particularly pleasant. And then, to the point you mentioned about, yeah.
Sorry, it is.
And then to the point you mentioned about, transit, what's transit's role in that corridor in the future as well. And so yeah, I think those are all some of those kind of big picture questions and some of the sort of things that go through our mind when we look at these things. And so, yeah, and I've heard a lot of these, I've been in discussions with Brett Leonard and Kelly a lot about TC1. And, we've talked about kind of the road configuration on Stadium. We don't have any current plans for, dieting that. That's not to say that we can't or can't look at that in the future. But, our attention right now is focused on some of these other tools that we've talked about. But I am curious to see what comes out of the TC1 and some of the direction that we hear from Planning Commission and Council about, what should help guide those decisions. Yeah.
And in terms, that's okay. Another follow-up question in terms of council direction. I'm not sure if you can answer this right now, but like how much of an impediment is the resolution that you put up to being able to do these things? Like, does it make it a deterrent as an option on the table as you look at different calming options and what is the best for a given corridor? Because I think some of the language around VMT, around level of service, I think there's pretty strong evidence that using that as a measure generally hasn't helped congestion. It's contrary to our other values and goals. So anyway, I just wonder, where there's room for council to provide more direction or to reverse policy that may be a hindrance.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a full answer. I will say my interpretation of that resolve clause that I showed on screen earlier is pretty automobile focused, right? I mean, it really talks about, volumes, level of service, traffic delays, right? So it doesn't really talk about, how many bikes and pads will use the corridor or what's that experience like. But that being said, I think a lot of the tools, suggest that, looking at traffic volumes should be a consideration when considering road diets. There is sort of an appropriateness for the different types of treatments. It's not necessarily a one size fits all. So that's all to say that collecting volume data, for example, collecting speed data, that all feels appropriate when looking at road diet analyses. Could that resolve clause be a little bit more holistic or more reflect our current values? Perhaps, but I don't, whether that deserves repeal or replace or, change, I won't speculate on that.
Ken.
So this is one area where I'm going to have to say, kind of speaking on behalf of our agency, that kind of full steam ahead and is not necessarily going to be beneficial in all cases for us. I think what we've found is now that the downtown area has been restructured and there's a lot more infrastructure, hard infrastructure in place, we're coming into different operational issues, and they're not the ones that we would have expected. I was expecting, that buses were going to be slowed down, we'd be in traffic forever. I mean, things have slowed down a little bit, but not enough to talk about. But what we're coming up against is like where the bikeways have been put in, and we've experimented with the city, and the city staff has been very helpful and very willing to make accommodations where they can, where we put raised bus stops in the bikeways. We're now having problems with conflicts between bike riders and people trying to get off the bus, because even though the bike riders are going slow relative to cars, they're still moving pretty quickly through those zones. So the other approach that we've been trying, now on State Street, is to basically have the buses pull up to the curb and go there. Well, we're now running into problems with where the delineators are at and how comfortable the drivers are with the lane widths, and are the drivers comfortable going into a delineated bike zone and trying to use their vehicle to cut off access so that they can pull to the curb. I think this is not to say that we don't want to go forward with this stuff moving forward, but I think as we move into these major corridors, especially if we're talking Plymouth or we're talking Fuller or stuff like that, those are BRT corridors, and technically State Street was a BRT corridor. So I think as we go forward into those, we're going to have some conversations as a larger group on the policy level and at the project level to try to sort through, as we put these different types of treatments in, what are some of the unintended consequences that these are going to have, going forward? Because we're trying to put together an educational component for our operators so that we can talk about, this is how you need to navigate through a bike lane area, with delineators and things like that. But at the same time, I think we still need to acknowledge, and this is just me kind of informing you guys, that as we go through some of these projects, if it feels like we're pushing back a little bit, it's not because we don't like the concept, it's that we have to kind of respect our operators' environments as well. So we're trying to put together some educational components to help them navigate through the stuff that's already out there. But at the same time, when we go into these major corridors, we need to make clear that I think some of the treatments that we're trying right now are probably not going to be beneficial, or they're probably not going to work out in some of these major corridors. So I'm very willing on a staff level. We're talking about how do we come together with city staff to kind of address some of these on the staff level. But if it's beneficial at some point, talking with Matt or talking with other people a little bit higher up than me, they're open to those ideas as well. So, like I said, we're supporting this, but we just want you guys to know that there have been some unexpected challenges that have come out of all of this.
Thanks, Kenya. I would hope that we consider these, improvements and changes to be iterative, and we maintain flexibility and cooperation between different stakeholders in the city. I believe that I would hope that's happened already. I know the William Street bike lane, I think, got moved around a little bit by the downtown branch of the library at one point to help buses turning. And so, yeah, I would expect and hope that that kind of cooperation continues.
And I just want to reiterate, thank you for city staff for, being as flexible as that you're able. And this commission and city council does need to know that the staff is very, very helpful for us. So I want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken, thanks for working with us as well. I know those can be challenges. Ken brings up a good point, and this is something that is top of mind for us. We try to be very sensitive where we're not creating an atmosphere where it's bikes versus buses, right? Because we think both of those are key to our carbon neutrality strategy as well as our Vision Zero strategy. And so they are both part of the solution set. And so making sure we can identify corridors and solutions that can work for both can sometimes prove challenging. And, we do work well. Ken is actually fantastic to work with, as well as a lot of his colleagues at the ride. So we appreciate that partnership. We never do anything to spike transit. I know sometimes there are some, pain points that occur, but it is something that, we learn from with every project, and sometimes in unforeseen ways. So yeah, I just want to thank Ken back and for his kind words, and thank him for his partnership as well as we analyze these projects.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right. In the interest of time, moving along to communications. First, staff report and updates. You've received a staff report providing project updates with your agenda materials. It also includes the July and August crash reports from the police department. And lastly, it includes a memo from the DDA about the Miller-Catherine cycle track. So Raymond, if you could review some of the highlights.
Yes, so I'll just go through this quickly. Again, as usual, I'll just highlight the changes from last month to this month. Annual street resurfacing project. I think the big thing that was added was some information about websites. So there's the project website has been updated, as well as the project tracking dashboard is now linked within the report. Scioto Church Road, there's still the sidewalk that we are aware of that needs to happen between Greenview and 7th on the north side. I think the easement situation is close to getting resolved with Ann Arbor Public Schools, but Nick Hutchinson would have been better to address that, so we can have a better update for you next month.
Hey, Dharma, do you want to jump in here on the
I
stuff?
just want to let you know the construction started. I mean, I go past that and it's already underway.
Thank you. Perfect. Good news. Construction's underway on that one. Thank you, Dharma, for that. I appreciate it. Sidewalk gaps. Broadway is complete. This is between Broadview and Plymouth on the northwest side. Newport is also done from Sunset to Down Up Circle. And Ellsworth is expected to be complete this fall. That's between State and Stone School. State Street improvement from William to Huron. Phase 1 was completed last year. Phase 2 is complete ahead of schedule, and just some minor punch list items remain. Platte Road from Huron Parkway to Packard is substantially complete. There are still some signal modifications. There's going to be yellow flashing left that's still in the works, but all the lanes are open to travel, and it is open. Broadway Street from Plymouth to Plymouth is also substantially complete and open to traffic. Geddes Avenue from Observatory to Highland is also substantially complete and open to traffic. State and Hill, the portion of State Street is substantially complete and open to traffic, but Hill Street has been postponed to next year, 2024. I think you were on that previously. South Main Water Main, or South Main Street Water Main. This is just south of Huron. That work is also complete. 7th Street in Greenview, I think we sent out the notice that there is a public open house tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at the Pittsfield branch of the Ann Arbor Library. Again, this is just an informational session about what the final concept is. Just letting people know what direction that project's going to head. Miller Avenue, there's public engagement tentatively scheduled for October 19th. This is the segment between Chapin and Newport. Where there will be a separate complementary effort to possibly look at extending the bike facility to First Street to the east so that it ties in with the DDA cycle track, and then hopefully out west to Maple as well. But that is going to be through a separate effort, but hopefully in terms of timeline. Pittsfield Village Improvement Project design work is scheduled to begin soon. The state trunk line jurisdiction transfer analysis. We've been meeting with the consultant and reviewing the cost side of the benefit cost analysis. We are hoping to conclude that study in about 2 months or so, and we will be bringing that to you with those findings. MDOT coordination, we are almost done with the design. We had a couple minor tweaks based on the last thing that we got, but those are being finalized right now. And then we're sending it over to MDOT for final review. But once it is approved, then it has to go out to bid for construction. Office of Sustainability and Innovation installation is underway for their EV chargers that are mounted on DTE poles. So this is a pilot project. Streetlights, CT has addressed 450 outages so far in 2023. The traffic calming program, let me start at the bottom, and I already mentioned this earlier, that City Council did approve on September 5th the resolution that came out of this body that suggested changes to the traffic calming program. And thank you to Dharma for sponsoring the council resolution that was ultimately approved. We have not tweaked the existing program yet. We actually have a meeting on the calendar. I think it's for next week to kind of go through and kind of there's going to be some process changes, some engagement changes, some things that have to reflect the action of the council. So we want to make sure that we get an updated program ready so that new petitioners that come in know what that new process looks like. So stay tuned on that. Let's see, existing projects in the queue. Granger from Forest to Olivia was installed. Granger from State to Packard is expected to be constructed here in the next couple months. Manchester Manchester and Baldwin were approved 2 nights ago by City Council. And you talked about Grandview tonight. I will note we've kicked off 3 other additional projects: Bird from Newport to Huron, Arella from Stadium to Pauline, and Henry from Golden to Packard have all kicked off as well. One thing I did want to highlight in this space, so the good news is with your action tonight to recommend approval of Grandview, that marks the 6th petition we've processed this year. That's good news. The bad news is we are quickly eating up our budget, especially with the 2 construction projects that we managed to get in, the 2 segments of Granger. So we might hit a budgetary wall before too long. And it's only September. We're only 2.5 months into the fiscal year, and we might run out of budget. So just wanted to let you know that if you do see a slowdown in the program, it's because we have done as much as we can with the budget allotted to us. So then some transportation implementation plan updates. Suzanne, who presented tonight, and Trevor Bryden, our other transportation planner, have been doing intercept surveys around the quick builds. Just trying to kind of see what those experiences are like for users. And we are working with HRC on the next round of quick builds. As I mentioned, this will be to take the buffered bike lanes and turn them into protected bike lanes or cycle tracks. Last I heard from Cyrus, that's about 90% design complete. So hopefully that will wrap up here shortly, and then we can put that out to bid. The bike corrals, we have now the bike racks in possession, and we were told by the folks that are in charge of permitting that that permit will go live, I think next week. So ultimately what we're looking to do is at 12 different locations, we should be able to mount, at 10 different locations, we should be able to mount these bike racks. So we have the first location, we already have an interested business we think we'll partner with. But again, spread the word if you know of others. And as soon as that permit is online, I can send you where to direct people to. World Car Free Day kicks off on Friday. So this is a week-long event in partnership with our team, the Office of Sustainability and Innovation, and Get Downtown, which really, it's kind of like the commuter challenge if you participated in those, really looking for people to use other modes of transportation aside from single occupancy vehicles. So if you aren't registered for that, please do so. It's always a good way for us to quantify how many people are using active forms of transportation and transit to get around town. Carbon reduction program, we've reported on this in the past that we got a grant from SEMCOG, Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, for $1.18 million for a couple of different projects. Right now, the one that we're working on is conversion of DTE streetlights from high pressure sodium, which are less efficient, to light emitting diode or LED lights. We're probably, what we're hoping to do is get a sample set that we can pilot. So of different color temperatures and different wattages, so we can get some impressions about which fixture we want before we put in the order for 5,000 lights. So we want to make sure we get it right, so we don't have to redo 5,000 lights. So stay tuned in that space. We're still talking to DT about what their offerings are, and we're trying to, figure out where to put those as well. Crashes, yes, we included the crash report for July, and then we also grabbed the August one as well. I think in the past there was some concern that we weren't sharing those in a timely fashion. A lot of it just has to do with when the council packet posts versus when your packet posts. We're always a couple of days out ahead of that. So, but we pulled the August report and uploaded it, I think, on Monday, thanks to Chris. So those are included in the packet. And then included in the packet is also a memo from the Downtown Development Authority. I think there was some conversations over the last month to 2 months about the experience of safety on Catherine, especially related to turning vehicles across the cycle track. So the DDA with their consultant went through and did some analysis in terms of what that crash pattern looks like. And pretty much the conclusion is that early data indicates that the bikeways are both well used and effective in meeting Vision Zero goals. The crash pattern in question, which again is drivers failing to yield to people biking and walking, is not occurring frequently. Even the if you saw the sort of comment from the person at council, they admitted that it was I think a no injury crash, or it wasn't a severe crash, which again is part of the sort of outcome we're looking for. So to that last point, overall crash severity and frequency has decreased following the bikeway installation. If you want to learn more about that, the memo is included in the packet. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Questions or comments? Emma.
I know I emailed you about this earlier, but also have heard from some residents, and just something seems really not right with the recent raised crosswalk that's on Granger. Feels flat. I biked over it over the weekend, and it feels like nothing is done except paint. And I wondered if maybe the contractor got it wrong, and if that's been seen.
I'm sorry, was the last part seen as what?
If city staff has actually taken a look at it.
Yeah, we've been out in the field even during installation, and so yeah, thank you for bringing this up, Dharma. We are finding raised crosswalks and raised intersections can pose some difficulties in implementation, depending upon what the existing road characteristic is, especially the geometries of the roadway. One of the things we feel pretty adamant about maintaining or focusing on is ADA compliance, making sure that the crosswalk achieves all the slopes and cross slopes. So that is one of the first defining characteristics. Even before we define what the speed hump should look and feel like, we really need to identify what that crosswalk experience should be like. And then one of the things that's interesting is the staff who was out there during construction explained to me Granger actually changes a little bit, even in the short distance between Forest and Olivia. So the experience over one speed hump is very different than the experience from the other, and it's even different depending upon the approach, because the road kind of slopes, as I understand it, from the south is, I think, a little bit higher than the north side of the road, and so trying to meet those grades, especially for that ADA compliance, proves challenging. So they did the best that they could to kind of create some lips and some other things that would have a traffic calming effect. I have heard some concerns from residents and others that it doesn't seem to be achieving the desired traffic calming effect. I don't quite know. We might have to have an internal discussion to see what other options are available to us, but I don't quite know what the remedy is at this time. It's for if we try to fix one thing, if we bring the height of the crosswalk, or if we bring the height of the speed hump up, then we might not be able to achieve the other, ADA compliance. And so these are some of the design challenges that we don't. And one other thing I'll note is traffic calming typically is not engineer designed. We don't do a plan set. They're kind of they make the they kind of design them in the field. Because when the crews are out there, they go ahead and shoot the grade, go ahead and determine the slopes based on how to make the connections. And so when they were out there in the field working with this one, this was kind of the best that they could do given the environment and the conditions that they had to work with. So I suspect, given some of the conversations that are happening, staff will be forced to look at it again. And yeah, so there's that.
Sorry to bring it up, but when I went over it, I thought this just doesn't, I don't know, not my experience of some of the other treatments that I've seen. So
thanks for bringing that up, Dharma. I've heard the same, but appreciate the discussion on that, Raymond. Any other comments or questions? All right. Let's see, liaison reports. Any commissioners who specifically serve as a liaison to another body or organization, if you would like to provide any brief reports or updates right now? Wanu?
Yeah, sure. I'll make this pretty brief. The Duvarn Village of Ann Arbor went through Planning Commission. There's an additional 120 units, so a total of 604 units on the corner of Pontiac and Duvarn. So I know Pontiac Trail has always had a little bit of connectivity issues, but one of the things that we thought was good was that it connects Leslie, so there's going to be kind of a thoroughfare of bicycle and more velocity for pathways. But just wanted to give you guys a heads up there. I think our no right turn on red has been received pretty well. There's Planning Commission is taking action on uncapping FARs. It's going to go to City Council, I think, next. So higher densities basically in downtown. So I think the no turn on red actually came at a good time. And then the last thing is that there was a public notice that went out for the Big Briarwood Sears redevelopment. So that is a 100,000 square foot sporting store with a field. One of the things that I thought was new from the public hearing that they did back in like April or something is that there's going to be like a road that kind of like bisects through the parking lot. So I thought that was interesting. I'm excited to see the designs, but just giving you guys a heads up on that one. But other than that, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ken.
Okay, so I want to end on a Ken not sounding like he's complaining note. Got a couple positive things here. So 20 for our 2024 millage plan, in October, we're going to begin public input. So it's going to run October 23rd through November 23rd. There will be several in-person opportunities to provide public input. We're putting the schedule for that together right now. There's also going to be several online opportunities. And then, of course, if you want to submit through email or snail mail or telephone or telegraph or anything like that, you're welcome to do those as well. And so the project that's referring to is going to be the millage services the expanded services that are going to be provided as a result of the affirmed 2022 millage. So that means an express route between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, expanded services, expanded hours of service on 7 days a week, including significant weekend hours of service expansion, and then increasing service on every route that operates on Saturday and Sunday up to every 30 minutes. And then the second thing I have to report is there's not a lot of notes here, but apparently coming up at the October board meeting, our CEO is going to be giving a recommendation to the board on how we're going to proceed with zero emission bus propulsion. Even I don't know what that one is yet, so stay tuned. It should be interesting to see what comes out of that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Fred, I think Larry has.
Yes, I've raised my hand. Yes, I have a couple of things that the commission wanted to bring to the Transportation Commission's attention because we don't know where to go. One of the things is and I think Councilwoman Gussie Edmund is going to try to get in touch with you too, Mr. Hess. We want to know what kind of education is going on because a lot of people, including myself, have been encountering bike traffic on the sidewalks while they have bike lanes, and I've had my canes clipped a couple of times. Another person has almost had her dog hit by bikes, and we got the bike lanes out there. We're trying to figure out where we go with this sidewalk safety issue because we don't mind the bikes, but we don't want them riding down the sidewalks and running into us. The second issue, and we also need to find a place to go with this, is someone almost got hit. A visually impaired person almost got hit, and I guess a couple other people almost got hit on this. They were coming, the cars going onto the on-ramp. There's a 7-second light, but it's on Ann Arbor Saline Road and 94, so we think that might be under DOT. And then the third thing is more of an announcement. I've been asked by the local advisory committee, LAC, to let you know that we're an advisory committee to AAATA, and we've had a lot of changes. So I've been asked to say that we're recruiting, that we're asking people that want to volunteer to get in touch with Robert Williams at our Williams. What is his? At theride.org. So that's what we're kind of exploring, the first two issues, and the third one was just a thing that I'd been asked to do by LAC.
All right, thank you, Larry. Anyone else? I think that's all our liaisons. All right, call for agenda items. Please email us anytime with ideas for agenda items. I'd like to say that Molly had to leave the meeting a little bit earlier, but she did want to pass along a request for a future agenda item, a resolution to ask council to set a policy that all multi-lane roads in Ann Arbor should be slated for lane reductions or conversion to bus-only lanes with a feasible but aggressive timeline. Just letting everyone know that that was a suggestion for an agenda item that Molly had posted in the chat before she had to hop off. Right.
And Brett, if I may, just a couple other things we expect to come to you with next month. There's the annual crash report. We have updated the crash dashboard. If you've had a chance to visit that website, it's the Ann Arbor website, a2gov.org/crash reporting. The map has been updated as a sort of like query tool. But a request I have of you that if you can send me in the next 2 weeks, if you have any specific analysis you would like us to perform, please let us know what that would be, because typically what we do is we give you kind of a big picture overview, and then we sometimes will do a deep dive on a subject. So let us know what that deep dive subject is, so in that way we want to bring something to you next month, and we can reflect what you're curious about. We also are tracking trunk line transfer, maybe next month, maybe the month after. And then I'm working with the John Waterman from the program Educating All Cyclists, possibly giving a presentation as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, everyone, please, if you have any requests for what you'd like to see out of the crash report, let us know. We'd, like Raymond just said, be much appreciated. All right, the next meeting will be held on Wednesday, October 18th, 2023 at 7 p.m. It will also be a virtual meeting. So if there are no objections, we will adjourn our September 20th, 2023 meeting. Seeing no objections, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.